now and look at the implications then, or the strength as evidence at least, of the audio recording played out by Advocate Mkhwebane at the briefing today. We're joined by legal expert Elton Hart. Elton, a very good evening to you. Always good to speak to you. So we heard what Advocate Mkhwebane says is just a fraction of recorded conversations between her husband and the now late ANC MP Tina Joemat-Pettersson, who was basically trying to solicit this bribe. Based on what we've heard, how strong is the evidence in her favor?
Good evening, Temikile and the viewers. What one needs to check is first, obviously we heard at the media briefing the recordings, and you could hear clearly there was a conversation between a person allegedly to be the late Tina Joemat-Pettersson, as well as the husband of a suspended public protector, Mr. Skosana. So that on itself, one can only ascertain if that evidence is genuine and authentic, if you get the device on which the original recording took place. And thereafter you need to now, and I heard today that there was a lot of speculation, yes, this is hearsay evidence. It's not hearsay because Mr. Skosana, the person who was involved in the conversation, was also present. So that places it in a different class of evidence. So I just want to dispel that notion also. But this can be damning evidence if it's proved to be true. And obviously for me, and I've listened to your previous conversation now, I think it was a member of the portfolio committee as well as an ANC member. The moment that these allegations, because there's tape recordings, we're not saying it's true or not true. The mere fact that it's out there, it's already the dangerous allegations. It means then they should consider saying, listen here, we want the chairperson to just sort of remove him from the process and maybe put somebody else there to give credibility and transparency to the process, because this is the very same thing that Mkhwebane has been complaining from the get-go about Jantjies sitting as the chairperson. So for me, I would think they would do the country a great favor by saying, why are we tugging in our heels and not wanting to remove this chairperson? Why is it so important for him to chair this? Any other person can chair from the ANC, right, if that is so important to them.
Does it matter, though, that there's no smoking gun against him, i.e. not his voice or a text message from him proving direct involvement?
No, for me, and the thing is what she said. She said there's other recordings that's in possession of the Hawks. We don't know in that recordings if his name was explicitly mentioned or even if his voice is on those recordings. We won't know until it's released and it becomes public knowledge. But the mere fact that Mr. Skosana, who's the husband, and obviously one should tread cautiously with what he's saying, because he's connected to the public or the suspended public protector. Let's just get it out that she's suspended, because he's connected to her, and one can perceive there's some sort of perceived bias. But the mere fact that he is there already, it shows that there's some danger lurking for the Section 194 inquiry, because if it proves that Mr. Skosana is telling the truth, that this conversation actually happened, and there's witnesses additional to him that can attest to this, there's maybe video footage that's there that shows that that meeting took place, then it places this evidence on a completely different level, and it's very dangerous then for us at the 194 committee to still continue with our current chairperson sitting there heading this committee. Then it's a waste of taxpayers' money.
So if we don't ultimately hear Jantjie and Phemisa Jodina's voices or see their texts, shall we say, as part of the body of evidence that will be presented from Advocate Mkhwebane's side, legally, what would it mean as far as perhaps subjecting them to an investigation or even taking them through the criminal process via the courts? Can it be done on the strength perhaps of a purported conversation between the late Tina Joemat-Pettersson and the public protector's husband alone?
If that is there, but now the problem is that, as they say, dead man leaves no tail, because Tina Joemat-Pettersson is now late. So she cannot come at the only person that is now there, but we need to tread cautious pertaining to his evidence that he's connected to the suspended public protector. He is biased in a certain sense. Does we want to know it or not? It is like that. So if there's no concrete evidence or any circumstantial evidence that links the chief whip of the ANC as well as the chairperson of the Section 194 inquiry to any wrongdoing, then we should now say there is no criminal sanctions or prosecutions that can follow. But if there is circumstantial evidence that proves and points to that they out to have, or they somehow partake in these discussions to try and extort a bribe from the suspended public protector or her husband, then we might see criminal prosecution follow. I'm not so sure if it will be successful, but it can follow.
Briefly, Elton, on the element that you started with, that Tina Joemat-Pettersson is sadly now deceased, and we're told that this is her having this conversation in the recordings. How big of a legal hurdle or an investigative hurdle is that? The fact that she's no longer here to give an account, a version, perhaps, of these interactions.
Obviously, the thing is, like, it is a sort of a hurdle for the prosecution if they want to prosecute the chief whip or the chairperson of the Section 194 inquiry based on the evidence that's the Hawks and the SIU. There is a hurdle that they need to now come and prove that it is actually the late Tina Joemat-Pettersson's voice on that recording, and that whoever she's referring to is correct. And then one needs to now go back and see, maybe they've got already records of her phone that shows that these conversations happened, because they need to also link that, maybe to check on Rika if this phone number belonged to Tina Joemat-Pettersson and the conversation between her and Skosana. Because Skosana can testify and they can cross-examine him. So there is a way that they can work with it, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult to prove the guilt of the chief whip as well as the Section 194 inquiry chairperson at this point in time.
Elton Hart, thank you for your time and your insights.